The phone rang late in the evening, the sharp sound breaking through the silence of Emily Carter's apartment. She was sitting at her desk, surrounded by piles of papers, numbers, and financial statements. It had been another long day at her accounting job in the heart of Brooklyn, New York. The workload had been overwhelming, but Emily had learned to embrace the chaos. Work was her escape, a way to keep her mind occupied, far from the weight of her family's troubles. Her mother's voice echoed in her thoughts. "Emily, don't be like your father. Don't let people drag you down. Work hard, keep your head down, and you'll get through this." Her mother had always been the tough one in their family. She had raised Emily and her younger brother, Daniel, with a firm hand after their father had walked out on them when Emily was just 12. Their father, a man who once promised them the world, was no longer part of their lives. He had left with no warning, no explanation. And although Emily had learned to push away any trace of grief over his departure, she had always felt a hole in her heart that she couldn't quite fill. But tonight, it wasn't her father's absence that threatened to break her composure. Emily glanced at the phone as it rang a second time, her stomach sinking. She recognized the number. It was the Brooklyn Police Department. "Hello," she answered, trying to steady her breath. "Miss Carter, this is Officer Wright with the Brooklyn Police Department. I'm afraid I have some troubling news regarding your brother, Daniel." Emily froze. Her body stiffened, her pulse quickening. Daniel. He was supposed to be the carefree one, the younger brother who never took anything seriously, the one who always seemed to make bad decisions, but somehow always found a way out. Emily had spent years trying to protect him, trying to shield him from their mother's sharp criticism, trying to make sure he was okay. But she had always believed deep down that no matter what, Daniel was capable of keeping it together. "He's been arrested," Officer Wright continued, breaking her train of thought. "He was caught stealing from a local jewelry store on Smith Street. He's currently in custody." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. "Stealing," Emily repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "My brother? Are you sure?" "Yes, Miss Carter. The police found him at the scene, and he's admitted to the crime. We're holding him for now. You'll need to come down here if you want to speak with him." Emily's mind went blank. Her world spun. She could hardly process what she had just heard. Daniel, her baby brother, who had always been her responsibility after their father left, had been caught stealing. She wanted to scream, to demand an explanation, but her throat tightened, her heart pounded in her chest. "How could you do this, Daniel?" she thought to herself. "How could you embarrass me like this?" But that wasn't fair. That wasn't the whole story. She knew that. Deep down, she knew Daniel didn't mean to hurt anyone. He had always made reckless decisions, but this was something bigger. The officer's voice brought her back to the moment. "Miss Carter? Are you still there?" "Yes, I'm coming," Emily replied, her voice shaking. "I'll be there as soon as I can." As soon as she hung up the phone, Emily stood motionless for a moment. Her mind raced with a million thoughts. How could this happen? What was he thinking? She had always hoped her younger brother would make better choices, that he would break free from the cycle of poor decisions that seemed to follow him. But now, it seemed that cycle had led him straight into the very worst possible scenario. The drive to the police station was a blur. Emily's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, her knuckles white. She tried to think of how she would approach Daniel. Would she be angry? Would she confront him with accusations? Or would she just be numb, lost in a fog of disbelief? She had no idea. She arrived at the Brooklyn precinct within 20 minutes, parked in a nearby lot, and made her way inside. Her heels clicked sharply on the concrete floor as she walked down the sterile hallway, past officers who barely glanced at her. She could feel their eyes on her, judging, wondering who she was and what kind of person would have a brother like Daniel. The receptionist, a woman in her late 40s with tired eyes, gave her a sympathetic look. "Are you Miss Carter?" she asked, her voice soft. Emily nodded. "Yes, I'm here to see my brother. Just sign in here," the receptionist said, gesturing to a clipboard on the counter. "He's in holding. I'll let Officer Wright know you're here." Emily signed her name with a shaky hand and waited. A few minutes later, Officer Wright appeared, a tall, stern man in his 40s. His face softened when he saw Emily. "Miss Carter," he said quietly. "Follow me." The hallway seemed endless as they walked together, the silence oppressive. Emily's thoughts raced, and her heart continued to beat erratically in her chest. She hadn't seen Daniel in weeks. He had been distant lately, disappearing for days at a time. He had been struggling with finding steady work, and he had been living with a few friends, but even they had been asking Emily for help, for money. She had always tried to support him, but at what cost? Finally, they arrived at the holding room. The door was heavy, and it creaked as it opened. Daniel was sitting on a bench inside, his hands shackled to the table. His head was bowed, and he didn't notice Emily enter. For a moment, Emily just stood there, taking in the sight of him. He looked so small, so vulnerable. This was her little brother, the boy who once wore a Superman t-shirt every day, the boy who had a big heart despite his reckless nature. "Daniel?" Emily called softly. Daniel looked up slowly, his eyes red and puffy. When he saw her, his face immediately went pale. "Emily, what are you doing here?" "I came for you," she said quietly, trying to keep her voice steady. "What happened? Why did you do this?" He stared at her for a moment, his face contorting with shame. Then he lowered his head again, avoiding her gaze. I didn't know what else to do. I wanted to get you something for your birthday, but I didn't have the money. I thought maybe if I just took something small, I could make it up to you. I didn't think they'd catch me." Emily's heart shattered as the truth hit her like a wave. Daniel hadn't stolen out of malice. He had stolen because he wanted to give her something, because he loved her so much that he was willing to risk everything for a simple gift. A gift. All this time, she had been angry. She had been disappointed. But now, standing here in front of him, she realized that her little brother had made a terrible mistake, driven by his love for her. Without thinking, she rushed toward him and hugged him tightly, the tears she had been holding back finally spilling over. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." Daniel hesitated for a moment, then wrapped his arms around her as well. "I'm sorry, Emily. I didn't mean to mess everything up." It was in that moment that Emily realized something profound. Forgiveness wasn't just about letting someone off the hook. It was about letting go of the anger and the shame, and seeing the person in front of you for who they truly were. Her brother needed her. And she needed him too. Emily pulled back slightly, still holding onto Daniel's shoulders as she looked into his eyes, searching for the boy she once knew, the boy who had laughed with her, who had been her little sidekick. The one she protected fiercely. But now she saw the weight of regret in his eyes, the sorrow that he had carried alone for too long. "Daniel," she said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "You didn't have to do this. You don't need to prove anything to me. You've already given me everything by just being you. I never wanted you to feel like you had to do something like this." He looked down, his face flushing with shame. "I know, Emily. I wanted to make it right. I wanted to show you that I can be someone you can be proud of. You've always been the strong one. And I don't want to disappoint you." The words stung, but Emily wasn't angry. She was heartbroken. Daniel had always looked up to her, always tried to live up to a standard she didn't even realize she had set. She had never meant to make him feel less than, but now, in the cold, sterile room of the police station, everything was clear. "Daniel, listen to me," she said, gently cupping his face in her hands. "I'm not angry at you. I'm not disappointed. I'm hurt that you thought you had to do something like this to get my attention. You don't need to steal to show me that you care. You're enough just as you are." Tears welled up in Daniel's eyes, and he bit his lip to stop himself from breaking down completely. Emily could see it, the guilt, the shame, the exhaustion. But there was something else too. A glimmer of hope, a tiny spark of relief. "How do you expect me to move forward after this?" he asked, his voice cracking. "I don't even know what to do now. How can I make things right?" Emily's heart ached as she saw the boy who once thought he could do no wrong, now struggling with the weight of his actions. She had never seen him this vulnerable before. All she could do was offer him the support she had failed to give earlier. "We'll take it one step at a time," she said firmly, her hands still resting on his cheeks. "This is a setback, but it's not the end of the world. I'll help you. We'll get through this together." Daniel nodded, his lips trembling. Emily could feel the tension leaving his body little by little. For the first time in what felt like forever, he seemed to believe in her words. The door to the holding room opened, and Officer Wright stepped inside, giving them both a moment to compose themselves. "Miss Carter," he said in a low voice, "you're welcome to stay for a bit longer, but we need to get him back to his cell. Visiting hours are over." Emily nodded, reluctantly pulling away from Daniel. She had so much more to say, so much more to give, but she knew it wasn't the right time. There would be plenty of time for that later. Right now, the most important thing was getting Daniel out of this place, out of the shame and the guilt that had been weighing on him. "I'll be back tomorrow," Emily said softly, looking at Daniel one last time. "I'll bring you some things, food, clothes. I'll help you through this, Daniel. I promise." He gave her a small, shaky smile. "Thanks, Emily." As the officer escorted Daniel out of the room, Emily stood there, her heart heavy. The anger that had once consumed her had faded, replaced by something more complex: concern, guilt, but also a strange sense of relief. She had been right to come here. She had been right to confront the truth, no matter how painful it was. As she walked out of the precinct, the cool night air hit her face. The city felt different now, quieter, as if the world had paused for a brief moment. Emily stood still for a moment, letting the weight of everything settle into her bones. She wasn't sure what the future held, but she knew one thing: she would do whatever it took to help Daniel, to make things right between them. She had spent so long carrying the burden of her family's expectations, but now, for the first time, she felt like she could finally start to share that weight. Daniel wasn't just her responsibility anymore. He was her brother, and that meant everything. That night, Emily returned to her apartment and sat at her desk, staring at the pile of work she hadn't touched. But now, her mind was elsewhere, lost in thought. She thought of Daniel's sad eyes, his apology, and the weight of his confession. There was so much to process. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be consequences to Daniel's actions, and she couldn't shield him from those. But she could help him rebuild. Help him make amends and, perhaps, rebuild their relationship in the process. But for now, she would focus on one thing: tomorrow. Tomorrow, she would visit him again. She would bring him the food and clothes he needed, but more importantly, she would bring him the one thing he needed most: her forgiveness. Emily smiled softly to herself, a tear slipping down her cheek. The healing had begun. The next morning, Emily woke up early, a heavy sense of responsibility settling in her chest. The hours of sleep hadn't been enough to completely clear the fog in her mind, but the moment she opened her eyes, she knew what she had to do. She sat on the edge of her bed, running a hand through her disheveled hair. Her apartment, as always, felt sterile and cold. There were no personal touches, no warm mementos to make it feel like a home. But today, for the first time in a long while, she wanted to change that. She needed to make a fresh start, not just for herself, but for Daniel as well. As she prepared for the day, her mind kept drifting back to the conversation she had with Daniel in the holding room. The tenderness in his voice, the raw vulnerability in his eyes, she hadn't seen him like that in years. She remembered the moments from their childhood when they had both been so innocent and carefree. She had always been the one looking out for him, making sure he was safe. But somewhere along the way, that bond had been strained. Emily hadn't realized how much she missed him until now. After a quick shower, she dressed in simple clothes: jeans, a t-shirt, and a jacket, and made her way to the kitchen. She grabbed a bag of groceries she had picked up the night before, knowing she wanted to bring something comforting for Daniel. A few sandwiches, some fruit, and even a small cake, nothing too fancy, but enough to show him she cared. She didn't know how to prepare for the visit ahead. Part of her was still afraid of what she might find when she saw Daniel again. Would he be angry? Would he shut her out? Or would the bond they once shared return, even just for a moment? The drive to the precinct felt longer this time. The streets of Brooklyn were bustling with morning traffic, the early sun casting long shadows over the cracked pavement. Emily found herself gripping the steering wheel, lost in thought. She couldn't stop replaying the conversation from the night before, the weight of Daniel's confession heavy on her mind. He had stolen for her. He had risked his freedom just to show her that he cared, to buy her something special. Her heart clenched at the thought of how misguided his actions had been. She wished he had come to her, wished he had trusted her enough to tell her what he was going through. She would have helped. She would have found a way. But now, all she could do was help him in the aftermath. She had made a promise to herself and to him that she would be there for him, no matter the cost. When Emily arrived at the precinct, she took a deep breath before stepping out of the car. She grabbed the bag of food from the passenger seat and made her way toward the entrance. The doors to the police station slid open automatically, and she was greeted by the cold, sterile atmosphere inside. It was the same as before, nothing had changed except the weight of her own thoughts. She signed in at the front desk once again and waited for Officer Wright to lead her to the holding room. She glanced around at the other people in the waiting area, some with their heads bowed in quiet conversation, others pacing back and forth in nervous anticipation. But Emily couldn't focus on anyone but Daniel. "Miss Carter," Officer Wright's voice broke her focus. "He's ready for you." Emily followed the officer down the narrow hallway once again. But this time, her footsteps were slower, more deliberate. She wasn't sure what she expected to feel when she saw Daniel, but she knew it wouldn't be the same as last night. This time, they both knew the truth. They both knew how much they had hurt each other without realizing it. The door to the holding room opened with a creak, and Emily stepped inside. There, sitting on the same bench as before, was Daniel. His eyes were bloodshot, and his clothes were wrinkled, a far cry from the boy she used to know, clean and tidy, always looking to make a good impression. But today, he looked different. He looked broken. When he saw her, a flicker of recognition passed over his face, followed by something else. Guilt, maybe. Or fear. Emily's heart broke at the sight. He was a grown man now, but in her eyes, he would always be the little boy she had once protected. "Hey," Daniel said softly, looking down at his hands. "You came." "I promised," Emily replied, her voice gentle. She moved forward and set the bag of food down on the table between them. "I brought you something." Daniel looked at the bag, then back at her, his lips curling into a faint, almost sad smile. "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to," Emily said, sitting down on the bench opposite him. "I wanted to remind you that you're not alone, Daniel. I'm here for you. Always." He didn't respond at first, his gaze drifting to the floor. Emily could see the weight of his emotions, the guilt that had eaten away at him since the moment he'd been caught. She could feel the distance between them, and yet, something inside her told her that this moment, this exchange, was important. This was where they would begin to heal. "You didn't have to steal, you know," Emily said after a few moments of silence. "You could have come to me. I would have helped." "I know," Daniel murmured, his voice thick with shame. "But I didn't want to burden you. You've always had your own life, your own problems. I didn't want to add to them. I thought maybe if I could just buy you something nice, then you'd see that I could be better. That I could do something for you for once." Emily's heart squeezed. "Daniel, I don't need you to buy me anything. I don't need things. I need you to be okay. I need you to trust me." He finally looked up at her, his eyes swimming with tears. "I'm sorry. I never meant to make you disappointed in me. I didn't know how else to show you how much you mean to me." Emily leaned forward, her voice soft but firm. "You don't need to show me anything, Daniel. You just need to be you. I don't care about the gifts. I care about you. And I'm here. No matter what happens next, I'm here." For a long moment, Daniel remained silent, his face unreadable. Then, without a word, he slowly reached across the table, his hands shaking. Emily stared at him, unsure of what he was doing, until he gently grasped her hand in his. "Thank you," he whispered. his voice barely audible. I don't deserve it, but thank you. Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as she squeezed his hand, her heart swelling with emotion. She didn't know what the future held for them, or how long it would take for Daniel to fully recover from this mistake. But in that moment, as they sat together in the sterile room, she realized that they had both taken the first step toward healing. And that was all that mattered. I'm not going anywhere, Daniel, Emily said softly. We'll get through this together. And for the first time in a long while, Daniel believed her. Daniel's grip tightened around Emily's hand, his fingers trembling slightly, as though he feared that if he let go, the fragile connection between them would shatter. Emily sat still, her heart thundering in her chest as she held his hand. The weight of the moment settled on her like a soft, heavy blanket, a mix of sorrow, relief, and the promise of something new, something better. For years, Emily had built walls around herself. She had become strong out of necessity, the responsible older sister, the one who took on the world's problems without asking for help. But in that moment, as she sat across from Daniel, she realized just how much she had closed herself off from him. She had kept her emotions locked away, thinking she was protecting him, when in reality, she had been shutting him out. And now, here he was, her little brother, lost and broken, but still so full of love for her. It pained her to know that he had suffered in silence, believing he had to earn her affection through desperate and misguided actions. She had to make it right. You didn't deserve this, Daniel, Emily whispered, her voice thick with emotion. You didn't deserve to feel like you had to carry this alone. Daniel looked down at their hands, his eyes clouded with regret. I thought if I could do something good for you, something that would make you proud of me, maybe I wouldn't feel so worthless. I just wanted to make up for everything, for all the times I messed up. Emily's heart shattered at his words. She had never known he felt this way. She had always seen him as the carefree younger brother who took everything lightly, who brushed off mistakes with a laugh. But now, she understood that all along, he had been carrying a deep sense of inadequacy, a need to prove himself not just to her, but to everyone. You're not worthless, Daniel, she said firmly, as if to drive the point home. You never were. You just got lost for a while, but you're still my brother. And nothing is going to change that. For a moment, Daniel remained silent, looking at her with a mix of disbelief and relief, as though he couldn't quite believe what she was saying. Then his shoulders relaxed slightly, and a small, tentative smile tugged at the corner of his lips. Do you really mean that? He asked quietly, his voice hoarse. Of course I do, Emily replied, her voice soft but resolute. I'm here, Daniel. I'm not going anywhere. It felt like a promise, one that they both desperately needed. Emily squeezed his hand again, reassuring him without words. The anger, the frustration, the confusion, it all seemed to melt away as she looked into his eyes. There was no room for resentment anymore, only the desire to heal, to rebuild what had been broken. The silence between them stretched on, but this time it wasn't uncomfortable. It was a quiet, shared understanding, an unspoken agreement that they would move forward together. Thank you, Emily, Daniel whispered, his voice barely audible, the words a confession, a plea, and an apology all in one. Emily nodded, her eyes filled with unshed tears. You don't have to thank me, Daniel. I'm your sister. This is what family is for. The door to the holding room opened, interrupting the moment. Officer Wright stepped inside, a polite but firm expression on his face. Visiting hours are almost over, Miss Carter. I'm afraid we'll need to bring Daniel back to a cell. Emily nodded, reluctantly letting go of Daniel's hand. As much as she wanted to stay. To continue the conversation, she knew she couldn't overstay her welcome. But there was a sense of peace in her chest now, a sense that things might finally begin to heal between them. All right, she said quietly, standing up. I'll be back tomorrow, okay? I'll bring you some more food, and we'll talk more. And we'll figure this out, Daniel. We'll get through it. Daniel stood slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. I don't know what I would do without you, he said softly. You'll never have to find out, Emily replied with a smile, her voice steady now. "I'm here. Always." As Officer Wright guided Daniel out of the room, Emily stood still for a moment longer, watching her brother disappear behind the closed door. A wave of exhaustion washed over her. But it was different from the fatigue she had felt before. This wasn't just emotional weight, it was the beginning of something new, something hopeful. She made her way out of the precinct, the cool evening air brushing against her face. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past few days settle into her bones. She had come here angry, confused, unsure of how to deal with what Daniel had done. But now she felt something else. Something lighter. Something like relief. The road ahead would be long, and there would be challenges. But Emily was ready. She was ready to help her brother rebuild, to support him in the ways she had failed to before. And she was ready to let go of the bitterness she had been holding onto for so long. As she drove back to her apartment, Emily realized that the healing had already begun. Not just for Daniel, but for herself too. For the first time in years, she felt like she was not carrying the weight of her family's past alone. And that was a burden she no longer had to bear. When she got home, she stood in front of her mirror for a moment, looking at herself with new eyes. She had always seen herself as the strong one, the reliable one. But now she saw something else. She saw a sister, a daughter, someone who was capable of forgiving, of understanding, and of loving deeply. She was capable of healing not just for others, but for herself. Emily smiled softly to herself. There was still much work to be done, but one thing was clear: she and Daniel would face it together. And for the first time in a long while, she believed that everything would be okay. The following morning, Emily woke up with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. The events of the previous day had left a deep impression on her, and though she hadn't slept much, there was an undeniable shift within her. She had promised Daniel that they would get through this together, and she intended to keep that promise. As the sun began to peek through the blinds, casting soft rays across the quiet apartment, Emily moved through her morning routine in a quiet daze. There was a renewed energy in the way she moved, as though the weight of the past was finally starting to lift. Her kitchen, usually the site of hurried breakfasts and coffee on the go, felt like a place of potential today. She made a cup of coffee and stood by the window, looking out at the bustling Brooklyn streets below. The city was alive with movement, people rushing about their daily lives. It was a stark contrast to how she felt inside, a calm stillness that seemed to have settled over her heart. Perhaps it was the understanding that things had already begun to change. She had taken the first step, and with that, so much more would follow. But there was a sense of urgency too. She couldn't ignore it. Daniel needed her, and more than that. He needed a plan, something tangible to work toward, a path forward. Sitting back down at her desk, Emily took out a piece of paper and began writing. It wasn't a list of tasks or deadlines like the ones she usually made, but a kind of blueprint. A plan for how she and Daniel would rebuild not just his life, but their relationship too. First, she wrote, rebuilding trust. The truth was, it wasn't just about Daniel's mistake. It was about her own realizations over the past 24 hours. She had been so focused on the things she thought she could control, her career, her responsibilities, that she hadn't noticed the fracture in her relationship with Daniel. She had shut him out, assuming he was fine, assuming he would always bounce back. But he hadn't, and that was why they were here today. Next, she wrote, helping Daniel find work. He had always struggled to keep a steady job, jumping from one temporary position to the next. She knew it wasn't because he lacked ambition or the drive to do better, it was that he had never had a clear direction. Emily needed to help him find something stable, something that would give him a sense of purpose. She thought of a few contacts in her network, companies that might be willing to take a chance on him. Lastly, she wrote, creating a support system. Emily knew that part of what had driven Daniel to desperation was the feeling that he had no one to turn to. He had always felt like a burden. And that feeling of isolation had only worsened over the years. Emily couldn't change the past, but she could change the future. The first step was to reintroduce him to the people who cared about him, their mother's old friends, family members, and even some of the people from his childhood who might be willing to reach out. Daniel needed to feel that he was wanted, that he belonged. As Emily looked over her notes, she felt a sense of resolve settle in her chest. She didn't know how long it would take to help Daniel get back on his feet, but she was committed to the process. She had taken the first step by forgiving him, but now they had to walk the journey together. She finished her coffee and prepared for the day, thinking about the next visit. She had already planned out what she would bring: more clothes, a few books, and some articles about job opportunities she had found online. She wanted to show Daniel that there was more out there for him, that his life didn't have to revolve around mistakes. The drive to the precinct was different this time. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't dreading the moment of confrontation. This time, Emily was going to see her brother with the intention of helping him build a better future. She wasn't just going to visit him, she was going to start working on their future together. When she arrived at the police station, she felt the familiar weight of uncertainty, but it wasn't overwhelming anymore. She signed in and waited, her hands folded in her lap, trying to calm the flutter of nerves in her stomach. She was ready. A few minutes later, Officer Wright appeared, leading her to the holding room. Daniel was already there, sitting on the same bench. His posture slightly slouched, his face thoughtful. He looked up when he saw her, and there was an instant softness in his eyes. For the first time, she could see something resembling hope in his expression. "Hey, Daniel said quietly. "You're back." "I'm back," she replied with a small smile, setting the bag she had brought down on the table between them. "I brought some things for you." Daniel's gaze flicked to the bag, and for a moment, there was a flicker of hesitation in his eyes. Emily could tell he was still carrying a heavy burden of guilt. But he didn't pull away this time. Instead, he nodded, reaching forward to open the bag. "I found some job listings," Emily said, her voice steady. "I've been talking to a few people, and I think there's a chance you could start working soon. But we need to work together, okay? I want to help you. I know it won't be easy, but you've got to believe in yourself." Daniel didn't immediately respond, but he picked up the sheets of paper from the bag and looked them over. His expression was unreadable, but Emily could see the wheels turning in his mind. For the first time, she saw him considering the possibility of a future beyond the prison walls. "Thanks, Daniel said quietly, his voice low. "I don't know what to say. I don't even know if I'm worth it." "Of course you are," Emily replied softly, leaning forward slightly. "You're my brother. You've always been worth it. And you always will be." Daniel met her gaze, the tears that had once been hidden deep inside him starting to surface once again. This time, though, Emily didn't shy away. She wasn't going to let him carry this weight alone anymore. She was here, and she was ready to walk beside him, no matter how long it took. They sat in silence for a while, the distance between them narrowing with every passing minute. Emily didn't feel the need to fill the silence with words. She didn't need to say anything more. She had already said what mattered. "I'll be back tomorrow," she said, her voice soft. "We'll start this process together. You're not alone in this, Daniel. Not anymore." As Officer Wright returned to escort Daniel back to his cell, Emily felt a sense of peace settle over her. The work had just begun, but for the first time, she wasn't facing it alone. She had her brother back, and together, they would rebuild. As Emily left the precinct that day, a calm sense of determination wrapped itself around her like a protective shield. The weight she had been carrying for years, burdens of guilt, resentment, and the ache of disconnect from her brother, had started to lift. It wasn't gone, but it was manageable now. The future felt uncertain, but it no longer felt impossible. The drive back to her apartment was uneventful, the streets of Brooklyn bustling as always. Yet, everything felt different. The city, with all its noise and chaos, seemed quieter somehow. Maybe it was the way she was finally listening to her own heart rather than burying it under layers of expectations and self-imposed obligations. That night, as Emily sat down to eat her dinner alone, her thoughts drifted back to Daniel. She had always tried to be strong for him, but she had never truly understood the depth of his struggle. She had assumed that his mistakes were a result of laziness or carelessness, but now she saw the truth. Daniel had been fighting his own demons, feeling inadequate, lost, and alone long before he had taken the desperate step of stealing. Emily had spent too long being the strong one, the one who had everything under control. But now she realized that true strength didn't come from standing alone. It came from allowing herself to be vulnerable, to admit that she couldn't do everything by herself. She had been trying to fix her family's problems for years, but it was only now, when she was willing to let go of the guilt, that she could truly help Daniel. The next few days felt like a blur as Emily shifted her focus from her job to her family. She spent hours going through potential job opportunities for Daniel, sending emails, making calls, reaching out to people she knew who might be able to offer him a chance. She even took time to research local support groups for individuals transitioning out of the prison system, hoping that Daniel would find strength in a community that understood his struggles. She didn't hear from him until the afternoon of the following day. The phone rang, and Emily picked it up with a sense of hesitation. She knew it was Daniel. There was no other reason for her phone to be ringing at this time. "Hey, Em," his voice crackled through the receiver. "I just wanted to say, thanks for everything." "Daniel, you don't need to thank me," Emily replied, her voice soft but steady. "We're family. This is what I should have done all along." There was a long pause, and Emily could almost feel him trying to find the words. Finally, he spoke again, his voice quiet but filled with sincerity. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said. About trusting myself and not just trying to please you or Mom. I don't know if I can change overnight, but I'm going to try. I'll take those job listings seriously. I'll show up. And I'll do my best." Emily's heart swelled with pride. She had never doubted Daniel's ability to change. She had only doubted whether he believed in himself enough to do it. Hearing him take that first step, even if it was just a small one, was everything. "I believe in you, Daniel," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "And I'm so proud of you. Just remember, it's okay to take it one step at a time. You don't have to do it all at once." "I won't let you down," he promised. When they hung up, Emily felt a strange sense of peace, as if something inside her had shifted. She wasn't naive enough to believe that everything was going to be perfect from here on out. There would be struggles ahead, there always were. But for the first time in a long time, she felt like they were on the right path. The following weeks were a whirlwind. Emily continued to visit Daniel, bringing him more clothes, more resources, and even small tokens of encouragement. She would often stay for hours, talking with him about the future, about job prospects, about life after prison, and about their mother, whose memory they both held onto in different ways. Daniel was quieter than she remembered, thoughtful. There were times when he would drift into silence, his eyes distant, but Emily didn't push him. She just sat there, by his side, offering him the space to process. The anger had long faded, and in its place was something deeper, more enduring, an unspoken promise that they would help each other heal. One day, after about a month of visits, Daniel told Emily that he had received an offer for a part-time job working at a local hardware store. It wasn't much, but it was a start, and it meant the world to both of them. "I'm going to do this, Em," he said with newfound conviction. "I'm going to show up every day. I'm going to make it work." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes, but she held them back. She wasn't going to cry in front of him, not this time. This time, she smiled and wrapped her arms around him. "I know you will," she said softly. Months passed, and Daniel's progress was slow but steady. He moved into a small apartment in a quieter neighborhood in Brooklyn, closer to his job. Emily helped him with the transition, ensuring he had everything he needed to make the next chapter of his life a success. Though it wasn't always easy, Daniel's confidence grew with every passing day. He found himself reconnecting with old friends, people he had once pushed away. Slowly, he rebuilt the relationships he had lost, realizing that, despite his past mistakes, there were still people who cared about him. Emily, too, had changed. She had allowed herself to let go of the need to be perfect. She had started reaching out more, letting people in, and not carrying the weight of her family's past on her shoulders alone. She found a balance between her work and her personal life, and she learned that the most important thing wasn't how much she could do, but how much she was willing to share with others. One evening, months after Daniel's release from prison, the two siblings sat together in Emily's apartment. They had just finished dinner, and the room was filled with a warm sense of familiarity, of comfort. As they shared stories and laughed about old memories, Daniel looked at his sister, his eyes soft, and said, "You know, I'm not the same person I was before. I don't think I'll ever be perfect. But I'm getting there. And it's because of you. You didn't give up on me when I gave up on myself." Emily smiled, her heart full. "I didn't give up on you because I always believed in you. You just had to believe in yourself too." And in that moment, surrounded by the steady rhythm of their shared lives, they both realized that the road to healing wasn't about being perfect. It was about forgiveness, love, and taking each step together, no matter how small. As the months continued to pass, Emily and Daniel's bond deepened in ways they hadn't anticipated. They had gone from a relationship defined by tension, disappointment, and missed chances to one grounded in understanding, trust, and mutual support. They had both changed, each in their own way. But neither of them would have made it without the other. One evening, as the fall air turned crisp and the city's lights began to twinkle in the distance, Emily and Daniel sat on her balcony, sipping coffee and watching the world below. The noise of Brooklyn seemed quieter from this height, like a distant hum that was easy to ignore. It was a rare moment of peace for them both. A time when everything felt right. Daniel glanced over at Emily, his eyes filled with a quiet gratitude. "I don't think I could have done this without you, Em. I know I've said it before, but I really mean it. You've been there through everything. I wouldn't be here without you." Emily looked at him, a soft smile tugging at the corner of her lips. It was a smile that held so much more than words could express. "You would have made it here eventually, Daniel. Maybe not as quickly as you would have liked, but you would have. You've always had it in you. I just had to remind you." Daniel leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. "Maybe, but I didn't believe it until you showed me." The silence that followed was comforting, not awkward. Emily's heart swelled with pride as she looked at her brother. This was what she had been waiting for, this moment of healing, of redemption. It wasn't just about the mistakes of the past or the guilt that had haunted them for so long. It was about the future they were building together, one step at a time. "I was thinking," Daniel said, breaking the silence. "I want to do something with my life, something that really matters. I know I can't fix everything all at once, but I want to try. I've been looking into getting my GED. Maybe even taking some classes to do something more, something that feels worth it." Emily's heart skipped a beat at his words. She had never heard him speak like this before, with such determination. For so long, she had feared that Daniel would always be stuck in the cycle of mistakes and missed opportunities. But now, it felt like he was finally ready to move forward. "That's amazing, Daniel," she said, her voice full of warmth and pride. "I'm so proud of you." "You've always been proud of me," Daniel said, his voice tinged with a bittersweet smile. "Even when I didn't deserve it." Emily took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. "You deserved it then too, you know. You just didn't see it. But I've always seen you, Daniel. I've always seen the good in you." His eyes softened at her words, and for a moment, he looked like the little boy she used to protect, vulnerable, but also full of hope. "I don't know if I'll ever be able to make up for everything, but I'll keep trying. I'll keep working hard, because I don't want to disappoint you again." "You never have to make up for anything," Emily replied gently. "You've already done more than I ever expected. You've changed, Daniel. You're growing, and that's enough." The conversation turned to lighter topics, plans for the weekend, movies they wanted to watch, and upcoming family gatherings. But even in the small talk, there was an undeniable shift. Their relationship, once fractured and filled with unspoken pain, was now full of hope and possibility. Emily realized that it wasn't about the big gestures or the dramatic moments of reconciliation. It was in these quiet moments, these simple, shared moments of connection, that they had truly begun to heal. As the weeks passed, Daniel's journey towards self-improvement continued. He enrolled in a GED program, working hard during the evenings after his shifts at the hardware store. Emily continued to support him, offering encouragement and helping him with his studies. It was a slow process, but Daniel's confidence began to grow in small, meaningful ways. Emily found herself thinking more and more about her own life as well. She had spent so many years focused on Daniel's struggles and her family's issues that she had neglected her own dreams. She had always wanted to travel, to see the world beyond the city. She had been so consumed by the idea of responsibility and duty that she had forgotten what it felt like to live for herself. But now, with Daniel on his way to rebuilding his life, Emily felt like it was finally her turn to take that next step. One afternoon, while Daniel was at work, Emily sat at her kitchen table, a cup of tea in front of her. As she scrolled through travel options on her laptop, she had always dreamed of visiting Europe, Italy, France, Spain. The idea of experiencing the world outside her familiar Brooklyn life excited her. She realized that, for the first time in a long time, she was thinking about her own future, what she wanted, not just what she felt responsible for. The thought was liberating. Emily didn't need to put her life on hold anymore. She could still be there for Daniel, but she could also live her own life, explore her own passions. It wasn't selfish, it was necessary. For the first time, she realized that she couldn't pour from an empty cup. She had to fill her own well before she could continue giving to others. When Daniel returned home that evening, he found Emily sitting at the kitchen table with a smile on her face. "Hey, what's got you so excited?" he asked, raising an eyebrow as he set down his bag. Emily looked up, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "I've been thinking," she said. "I'm going to take that trip I've always wanted. Europe. I'm going to start planning." Daniel's eyes widened in surprise. "Wow. That's amazing, Em. I never thought I'd hear you say that." "Me neither," Emily said with a laugh. "But it's time. It's time for me to do something for myself. You've got your GED. And I've got my dreams." Daniel grinned, the pride he felt for his sister shining through. "I think that's the best thing you could do for yourself. You deserve it." The conversation shifted to travel plans as Emily excitedly shared ideas of where she might go, what she might see, and how she would document the experience. But in that moment, she realized how far they had both come. Daniel was on his way to building the life he had always wanted, and she was finally starting to live her own life too. They had both grown individually, but also together. The past had been painful, but it had shaped them into the people they were now, stronger, more resilient, and ready to face the future with hope. As they sat together, laughing and making plans, Emily felt a deep sense of gratitude. She had helped her brother find his way, but in doing so, she had found herself too. And as the sun set over Brooklyn, Emily knew that this was just the beginning. The road ahead would have its challenges, but with each step they took, together, they would continue to heal, to grow, and to build the future they had both always dreamed of. As the weeks went by, Emily's excitement about her upcoming trip grew. But there was something else that occupied her thoughts more and more, her evolving relationship with Daniel. The changes in him, the newfound confidence in his voice, the lightness in his demeanor, it was all a stark contrast to the anxious, self-doubting person he had been when he first came out of prison. He was still the same person she knew and loved, but now he was emerging from the shadows of his past, taking deliberate steps toward a future that was his to shape. One evening, while they were having dinner together, Daniel put down his fork and cleared his throat, his usual reserved demeanor replaced with a hint of nervousness. Emily looked up from her plate, sensing the shift in his mood. "Is everything okay?" she asked, tilting her head slightly. "Yeah, everything's fine," Daniel said, but his gaze was far away, his brow furrowed as if he were trying to find the right words. "I've just been thinking. I know you're planning your trip to Europe and all, but I want to do something. I want to take a real step forward, something more permanent. Emily put down her fork and turned her full attention to him, curiosity mixed with concern. What do you mean, Daniel? I mean, I've been thinking about this for a while. And I know it's a big step, but I want to go back to school. Maybe even college if I can. I've been looking into a few programs that offer second chances for people with a criminal record. And I think it might be the right time. The words hung in the air between them, and for a moment, Emily didn't know how to respond. She had always believed in Daniel's potential, but the idea of him going to college seemed like something so distant, so unreachable. Still, the more she thought about it, the more she realized that it was exactly the kind of step he needed to take. Daniel, that's incredible, Emily finally said, her voice thick with emotion. I'm so proud of you for thinking about this. But I want you to know something, this isn't just about going to school. It's about you believing that you deserve better. You've always had the potential. You just needed to see it for yourself. Daniel looked at her, his eyes searching for something, maybe reassurance, maybe validation. You really think I can do it? Absolutely, she said without hesitation. I've watched you grow so much, and I know you can do anything you set your mind to. College might seem like a huge leap, but it's just another step in the journey. You've already come so far. A small smile tugged at Daniel's lips, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he looked truly hopeful. Thanks, I think I needed to hear that. I'm not sure how to start, but I'll figure it out. I don't want to let you down. You won't let me down, Emily replied, reaching across the table to give his hand a reassuring squeeze. You're doing this for yourself. I'm just here to support you. And I will, every step of the way. In the weeks that followed, Daniel's resolve grew stronger. He began looking into adult education programs and researching schools that offered flexible schedules for people like him, those who had made mistakes but were determined to turn their lives around. Emily helped him research scholarships for people with criminal records, reaching out to organizations that provided support for second-chance students. Though it was clear that Daniel's path would not be easy, his determination was palpable. He enrolled in a local community college, starting with a few night classes. The first day he walked into the classroom was filled with nervous energy, but it was also a moment of quiet triumph. He had taken that first step, a step he once believed would forever be out of reach. Emily was there to celebrate with him afterward, picking him up from the campus and hearing all about his first day. It wasn't a perfect journey. There were moments of doubt, times when Daniel questioned if he belonged in the academic world. But each time he stumbled, Emily was there to remind him of how far he had come, how much potential he had always held. As Emily's own departure for Europe drew closer, the dynamic between her and Daniel had shifted in subtle but powerful ways. They were no longer just siblings struggling to heal old wounds. They had become partners in each other's growth, each one supporting the other's dreams and aspirations. Emily was no longer just the protector, the strong one. She had allowed herself to have dreams too, to step into her own life beyond her responsibilities to her family. And in doing so, she realized how much she had grown as well. The evening before Emily left for Europe, they sat together in her apartment, a quiet moment before the whirlwind of travel began. Emily had packed her bags and was ready to leave the next day. Daniel was sitting across from her, his arms folded, a small but proud smile on his face. Can you believe it? Emily said, breaking the silence. Tomorrow, I'm really going. It's happening. I'm proud of you, Daniel said, his voice sincere. You've been talking about this trip for years, and now you're finally doing it. It's about time. Emily smiled softly, her eyes shining. It feels like I've been waiting for this moment forever, but in a way, I'm glad I waited. I think I'm going for the right reasons now. And I'm ready to take that step. Just like you're doing with school. Yeah, Daniel nodded. I guess we're both stepping into new chapters of our lives, huh? Looks like it, Emily said, her smile widening. I'm so proud of you. Daniel, you're doing amazing things. Don't ever forget that. I won't, Daniel replied, his voice steady. And you won't forget that you have a brother who's rooting for you every step of the way. Emily stood up and moved to the window, looking out at the city one last time before her adventure began. She felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that her relationship with Daniel had transformed. They were no longer just family by obligation. They were two people who had chosen to heal, to grow, and to support each other. As she turned back to Daniel, her heart full of love for her brother, she said, "I'm going to miss you while I'm gone. But I'm also excited for what's ahead. For both of us." Daniel stood up and walked over to her, giving her a hug. "I'll be here when you get back. And we'll both be stronger for it, Em. You've got this. I've got this." "I know," Emily said, holding him close. "And we'll always have each other." The next morning, Emily stood at the airport, her bags packed and ready for the journey ahead. She was nervous, excited, and filled with the kind of anticipation she hadn't felt in years. As she made her way to the departure gate, she couldn't help but think about all the changes she and Daniel had gone through. What had once felt like a fractured, broken family was now a place of hope and possibility. As the plane took off, Emily gazed out the window, watching as the city below grew smaller and smaller. She didn't know exactly what awaited her in Europe, but she knew one thing for sure: she was going to face the world on her own terms. And when she returned, she would be a new person, ready to face the next chapter with her brother by her side. For the first time in a long while, Emily felt truly free. As Emily's plane ascended into the sky, leaving Brooklyn behind, a feeling of liberation washed over her. The city below, with all its noise and clutter, was now distant, fading into a patchwork of lights and shadows. She had been so focused on carrying the weight of her family's struggles that she had never truly allowed herself to breathe, to take in life beyond the confines of responsibility. But now, for the first time in years, she was letting go. Her heart was light, full of promise, and although she couldn't see it from the window of the plane, she knew the future she had been working toward for so long was beginning to unfold. She wasn't running away, she was moving toward something bigger, something that had always been just out of reach. It wasn't just about travel or experiencing new cultures. It was about taking control of her own life, about reclaiming parts of herself she had long forgotten. In the weeks that followed, Emily's journey through Europe was everything she had hoped for and more. She marveled at the architecture in Paris, the art in Florence, and the vibrant streets of Barcelona. But amidst the beauty and the excitement, there was always a quiet space within her where she thought of Daniel. She kept in touch with him through video calls, hearing his voice and seeing the changes in his life. Each conversation with him left her feeling more confident in the path she had chosen. Daniel had kept up with his classes, and Emily could hear the pride in his voice as he spoke about his progress. His journey was far from easy, but with every challenge he faced, he grew more determined. Emily knew that it wasn't just the knowledge from his courses that was changing him, it was the belief in himself, the sense of possibility that had once been absent from his life. One evening, while sitting on a cafe terrace in Rome, sipping espresso under the golden glow of the setting sun, Emily got a text from Daniel. "Hey guess what? I passed my first exam. A solid B. I know it's not an A, but it feels like a win." Emily smiled as she read the message, her heart swelling with pride. It wasn't just about the grade. It was about the effort, the persistence, the resilience. The fact that Daniel, who had once felt so defeated, was now looking forward to a future full of possibilities, made all of Emily's sacrifices, all the waiting, worth it. She quickly typed a reply. "Daniel, that's amazing. You should be proud of yourself. You're doing it. And I know you're going to keep getting better. You've got this." Back in Brooklyn, life was moving forward for Daniel as well. He had taken to his studies with newfound focus, balancing his job at the hardware store with his courses. It wasn't easy, and there were still days when he doubted himself, but each time he hit a roadblock, he found the strength to push past it. He had become part of a study group with others in the same situation. People who had made mistakes but were now rebuilding their lives. They encouraged each other, shared their struggles and triumphs, and provided the kind of support Daniel had never thought possible. But it wasn't just his studies that were improving. Daniel had started to reconnect with old friends, people who had drifted away during his darker years. One afternoon, while walking home from class, Daniel ran into an old friend from high school, Sarah, who had heard about his recent turnaround. She was now a graphic designer and had been living in the city for a few years. They spent hours talking, catching up on lost time. And Daniel realized how much he had missed the companionship he had once taken for granted. Over the next few weeks, he and Sarah rekindled their friendship. And it wasn't long before they started spending more time together, getting coffee, talking about their aspirations, and sharing their stories of struggle and survival. Daniel found himself looking forward to their meetups, and slowly, he began to entertain the idea that maybe there was room for more in his life, room for friendships, for love, for connection. Emily had been in Europe for 2 months when she got another message from Daniel. This one came with a photo, Daniel standing proudly in front of the local community college, a certificate in his hand. "Look what I just got. I passed my first semester. I'm officially on my way." Emily's heart leapt as she saw the smile on Daniel's face in the photo. It was a smile she hadn't seen in years, genuine, proud, and full of promise. She knew it wasn't just about the certificate. It was about the fact that Daniel had stayed committed, that he had done what so many people doubted he could do. He had proven to himself that he was capable, that he was worthy of success. "I'm so proud of you, Daniel. You're doing something amazing. I can't wait to hear all about it when I get back." The message was simple, but the emotions behind it were everything. They had both come so far, and now Emily could truly see the light at the end of the tunnel for both of them. As her trip neared its end, Emily began to think more about her return to Brooklyn. She had learned so much about herself during her travels, about her own strength, her own dreams, and how much she was capable of when she allowed herself to live fully. But there was something even more important waiting for her at home. She couldn't wait to see Daniel again, to hear about his first semester in person, to catch up on everything they had missed. To see the man he was becoming, not the broken, lost young man she had once known, but someone with potential, with hope, with a future. When Emily returned to Brooklyn, she found a new sense of excitement about the life she had been building for herself and the life Daniel was now building for himself. They had both changed, both found a new sense of purpose. And neither one of them would ever be the same again. The first thing Emily did when she stepped into her apartment was to call Daniel. "I'm home," she said simply, a wide grin on her face. "I can't believe it." Daniel's voice came through the phone, warm and full of enthusiasm. "I've been waiting for you to get back. I've got so much to tell you. So much to show you." Emily laughed softly. "I've missed you, Daniel." "I've missed you too," he said. "And you're going to be so proud of me. You won't believe everything that's happened." The two siblings shared a quiet moment, the kind they hadn't had in years, and for the first time, Emily realized that the journey she had set out on wasn't just about travel or personal growth, it was about the healing that had taken place in both their lives. They were finally finding their way back to each other, and there was nothing more fulfilling than that. As they spoke, Emily looked out of the window at the city that had been her home for so long, feeling a deep sense of peace. She knew that no matter where life took her next, she and Daniel would always have each other. Together, they had healed, grown, and built the future they had both dreamed of, one step at a time. And as the city lights twinkled in the distance, Emily knew that this was only the beginning. As Emily settled back into life in Brooklyn, it felt as though time had slowed down, allowing her to truly savor the changes that had taken place in her life and Daniel's. There was an underlying sense of peace in the apartment that hadn't been there before, a quiet harmony between her and Daniel, who was growing into the person he always had the potential to be. Their relationship had transformed from one filled with tension and unresolved hurt to one founded on mutual respect, understanding, and shared healing. Emily and Daniel spent more time together than ever before. They would sit on the balcony in the evenings, sipping coffee or tea, and talk about everything from the past to the future, from their dreams to their daily challenges. It felt as if they had finally figured out the delicate balance of being family and friends, both offering each other advice and encouragement, while also recognizing that they had each been through separate journeys to get to where they were now. One weekend, as the weather warmed, Daniel invited Emily to a local festival. It was an event he had gone to with friends in the past, but this time, he asked her to join him, proud of how far he had come. As they walked through the festival grounds, surrounded by the music, food stands, and laughter of people enjoying the sunny day, Emily could see just how far Daniel had come. He was laughing, joking, and exuding a sense of confidence that was hard to miss. For the first time, Emily wasn't looking at him through the lens of the mistakes of the past. She was seeing the man he was becoming, a man who was carving his own path, who was finding joy in the simplest of moments. She realized how far they had both come, how much they had overcome together, and how much they had yet to accomplish. "This is great," Emily said as they stood in front of a food stall, both deciding on what to try next. "I'm really happy we're doing this." Daniel grinned. "Me too. I mean, it's weird to think about everything that happened, but if I hadn't gone through all of that, I wouldn't be standing here with you now. And I wouldn't be doing all this. I wouldn't be where I am." Emily reached out and gave his shoulder a quick, affectionate squeeze. "I'm proud of you, Daniel. You've come so far." They spent the day exploring the festival, trying new foods, playing games, and simply enjoying each other's company. It was one of those rare days that felt timeless, like everything was exactly as it should be. They shared a sense of freedom, not just in their surroundings, but in the deep, unspoken bond that had grown between them. A few months later, Daniel's hard work began to pay off even more. He had completed his GED, and his professors at the community college were beginning to take notice of his dedication. They encouraged him to consider applying for scholarships and internships, offering him opportunities he had never imagined possible. Daniel, who had once doubted his place in the world, was now becoming a person who believed in his potential, no longer someone weighed down by his past, but a person actively building his future. Emily, too, was flourishing. She had found a balance in her life between her career and her personal growth. She took the time to explore new hobbies, reconnect with old friends, and even considered continuing her own education in a field she had always been curious about, psychology. She wanted to understand the human mind, the way people processed emotions, and the way they navigated their own journeys of healing. Her trip to Europe had unlocked something in her, a desire to keep growing, to keep learning. She realized that life wasn't just about taking care of everyone else, it was also about nurturing her own curiosity and her own dreams. One evening, several months after Emily returned, she found herself sitting across from Daniel in their favorite restaurant, a cozy little place in Brooklyn with soft lighting and a warm, welcoming atmosphere. The conversation had turned to their future, what they wanted for themselves, what they hoped to achieve. "You know," Daniel said, looking across the table at Emily, "I've been thinking. I don't think I'd be here if it weren't for you. You didn't just help me get through the tough times, Em. You showed me what it looks like to actually live life, to embrace the possibility of something better." Emily looked up from her glass of water, meeting his gaze. "That's all you, Daniel. You did the hard work. You showed up, you fought for yourself." Daniel smiled. "Maybe, but you helped me see it was worth fighting for. So, what's next for you, Em? What's your next step?" Emily paused, considering his words. She had spent so much time focused on Daniel, on their family, that she hadn't stopped to think about what her own future looked like now. "I've been thinking about going back to school," she said slowly, the words hanging in the air between them. "Maybe studying psychology, like I said. But I also want to continue traveling. I want to keep experiencing the world, meeting new people, and really living." Daniel nodded, a smile playing at his lips. "That sounds amazing. You should totally do it. I know you'll make it happen. And I'll be here, cheering you on." For a moment, Emily felt a sense of clarity that had eluded her for so long. The future didn't feel daunting anymore. It was full of possibilities, full of opportunities, both for her and for Daniel. She wasn't just a caretaker, a fixer, someone bound by duty. She was her own person with her own dreams, and she was ready to chase them. "You know, I think I'm ready to make that next step," she said with newfound confidence. "Maybe it's time I take a leap too." "Then do it," Daniel said, his voice full of conviction. "Whatever it is, I've got your back. We've both come this far. We're not stopping now." And with that, Emily realized how much her life had changed. Not just in terms of her relationship with Daniel, but also in the way she saw herself. She had become someone who wasn't afraid to step into the unknown. She wasn't the same woman who had felt trapped by the weight of her family's past. She had found her own way. And it was a journey she was ready to continue. As they finished their meal and stepped out into the cool evening air, Emily looked at her brother, who had become her biggest source of inspiration. They had both come through the storm, but now they stood on solid ground, side by side, ready to take on whatever came next. Together, they were unstoppable. And the future, whatever it held, was full of endless possibility. The days that followed felt like a new chapter, not just for Emily and Daniel, but for both of them as individuals. Emily poured herself into her research, exploring schools and programs for psychology, while Daniel continued to focus on his studies. The bond they had forged over the past months was unbreakable. A solid foundation that allowed both of them to thrive and dream without hesitation. There was no fear of failure anymore, no self-doubt creeping in. They had learned to stand tall, together and separately. One evening, several weeks after their conversation at the restaurant, Daniel approached Emily with a determined look on his face. He had been wrestling with something for a while, and he knew it was time to share it with her. I've been thinking a lot about what I want to do after I finish my degree," he said, his voice calm but serious. Emily raised an eyebrow, putting down the book she had been reading. "What's going on, Daniel? What's on your mind?" "I want to give back," he said, his eyes bright with purpose. "You've been through so much, and I've seen how much you've helped me, not just get my life together, but find the strength to believe in myself again. I want to do something similar for people who have been through tough times, for people who need a second chance, like I did." Emily's heart skipped a beat. "You mean like working with people who are struggling, helping them find their way?" "Yeah," Daniel nodded. "I've been looking into social work and counseling programs. I want to help people who have gone through the system or who feel lost, like I did. I know what it's like to feel like there's no way out, and I want to show them that there is." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as she listened to him. She had always known that Daniel had the potential to do great things. But hearing him articulate his desire to give back, to turn his own pain into something beautiful for others, was everything she had hoped for. He wasn't just moving forward in his own life. He was becoming someone who could inspire others to do the same. "Daniel, that's amazing," Emily said, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm so proud of you. You're going to make such a difference in so many lives." Daniel smiled, a sense of relief in his expression. "I hope so. It feels like the right thing to do. But I know it's not going to be easy. I'll have to work hard, and it's a long road. But I'm ready. And I know you'll be there to support me." "Always," Emily replied, reaching out and squeezing his hand. "You've got this, Daniel. You've always had this in you." The next few months were filled with applications, interviews, and preparations for Daniel's next step. He continued his studies at the community college. And when he wasn't in class, he was researching social work programs. He even started volunteering at a local shelter, helping those who were trying to rebuild their lives after incarceration. And the experience solidified his decision to pursue this new path. Emily, too, was making progress in her own life. She enrolled in a psychology program at a nearby university, working part-time to support herself while diving into her studies. There were days when she felt overwhelmed by the workload, but she never gave up. She found joy in the small victories, in the knowledge she was gaining, and in the realization that her dreams were now within reach. A year later, as spring blossomed in Brooklyn, Emily stood on the stage at her university's graduation ceremony, a proud smile on her face. Her journey had been long and filled with challenges, but she had made it. She had walked into the unknown with hope in her heart, and now she was finally reaping the rewards of her hard work. As the ceremony ended and the graduates gathered for photos, Emily looked around the crowd for Daniel. He had made it a point to be there, to watch his sister achieve her dreams, just as she had done for him. It was a small, quiet moment, but it meant the world to Emily. She had learned that success wasn't just about personal achievement, it was about sharing those moments with the people who had helped you grow along the way. When she found him, standing by the steps with a wide grin on his face, she walked over and wrapped her arms around him. "I did it," she said softly. Daniel laughed, his arms around her in return. "Of course you did. I always knew you would. You're the one who's going to change the world," Emily replied, her eyes shining. "You're going to do more than just finish school. You're going to help so many people." Daniel smiled, but there was a look of humility in his eyes. "We're both changing the world, in our own way." The two of them stood there, sharing a quiet moment in the midst of the celebration around them. They had both come so far, not just in their careers, but in their relationship, in their ability to see each other for who they truly were: flawed, beautiful, and worthy of love. They had both found their way together. Months passed, and Daniel began his studies in social work, while Emily started working at a community counseling center, providing support to individuals struggling with mental health challenges. They both knew that the road ahead would be filled with challenges, but they no longer feared the obstacles they would face. They had each other. They had built a foundation of trust, love, and resilience that no hardship could break. And as Emily watched Daniel flourish in his new career, helping others find hope in the face of their struggles, she knew that all of the pain, all of the heartbreak, had led them to this point. They had taken the hardest road, the one filled with darkness, but it had ultimately led them to a place of light, a place where healing wasn't just possible, but where they could now give back and help others find their way. In the quiet moments, when the weight of the world felt heavy, Emily would pause and remind herself of the journey they had taken, of how far they had both come. It wasn't just about overcoming obstacles. It was about finding joy, strength, and purpose in the process. She had learned that the real beauty of life wasn't in the destination, but in the way you learned to walk through the journey, side by side with the people you loved. And for the first time in a long time, Emily knew that she was exactly where she was meant to be. As the months passed, Emily and Daniel continued to grow, each in their own way, yet always staying connected. Their paths were diverging in some respects, Emily in her new career as a counselor and Daniel in his pursuit of social work, but their bond had become unshakable. It was a quiet, unspoken understanding that no matter how far they went in life, no matter how different their dreams might seem, they were always there for each other. One evening, Daniel invited Emily to a local community event, a fundraiser for a program aimed at providing education and job opportunities to formerly incarcerated individuals. It was a cause that had become close to his heart, and he had recently started working with them as part of his social work internship. "You're going to love this," he said with enthusiasm when he called to invite her. "It's all about giving people a second chance, and you know how much that means to me." Emily agreed immediately. She had seen firsthand how much Daniel had grown, and the fact that he was now actively helping others who had been through similar struggles was deeply inspiring. She was proud of him, not just for the work he was doing, but for the person he had become. The night of the event, they arrived together, walking into a room filled with people from all walks of life, some familiar faces from their community, others strangers who were there to show support for the cause. The atmosphere was warm and welcoming, filled with the hum of conversations and the clinking of glasses. Daniel introduced Emily to several of his colleagues, people who were just as passionate as he was about making a difference. She could see the light in his eyes as he spoke about the work they were doing, helping people reintegrate into society, providing mentorship, and supporting them through the difficulties they faced. As the evening wore on, Emily found herself reflecting on how far both she and Daniel had come. It felt like a lifetime ago that they were sitting in her apartment, uncertain about what the future would hold. Now, they were both in careers that not only fulfilled them but allowed them to help others. "Look at you," Emily said to Daniel later that evening, as they stood together by the stage where a local activist was giving a speech. "You've turned your pain into purpose. I'm so proud of everything you've done." Daniel smiled, his eyes softening as he looked at her. "I wouldn't have done it without you, Em. You've always believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. You showed me how to keep going, even when things seemed impossible." Emily felt a lump form in her throat. She had always known how important her support had been to Daniel, but hearing him say those words made her realize just how much her presence had meant to him. And it wasn't just about the mistakes he had made, it was about the person he was becoming. Someone who was not only capable of change, but actively creating that change. "I've been thinking about something lately," Emily continued, after a brief pause. "About how everything we've gone through, the struggles, the pain, the healing has led us here. We've both been on such different paths, but they've always been connected. And I realize now that this is just the beginning of what we can do, not just for ourselves, but for others." Daniel nodded, his gaze fixed ahead. "It's like we've come full circle, right? We've both found our way, and now we get to help others do the same." "Exactly," Emily said softly, her heart swelling with pride. "We've learned so much along the way. And now we're in a position to give back, to offer the same hope and support that we needed when we were struggling." The evening continued, filled with inspiring speeches and conversations about the impact of second chances, about how people could transform their lives when given the right opportunities. As Emily listened, she couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the journey, for the lessons learned, and for the bond she shared with her brother. In the months that followed, Daniel continued to flourish in his social work internship, taking on more responsibilities and finding new ways to contribute to the community. His work with the program was gaining recognition, and he had started to build a network of people who supported his mission. He even began offering mentorship to young men who had recently been released from prison, guiding them through the challenges of reintegration. Emily, on the other hand, had started her own counseling practice, focusing on helping people who had experienced trauma or struggled with mental health. She found deep fulfillment in her work, knowing that she was making a difference in people's lives. Every day, she saw the power of vulnerability, of people opening up and healing from their pasts. It reminded her of her own journey with Daniel, the way they had both opened up to each other and grown stronger because of it. One evening, as the sun set over the Brooklyn skyline, Emily sat in her office, looking out the window at the city below. The air was cool, and the streetlights flickered on, casting a soft glow over the streets. She thought back to when she had first moved to the city, unsure of what the future would hold, uncertain about how she would balance her career and family. But now she felt grounded. She had built a life that was hers, one that was rooted in purpose, love, and the willingness to embrace change. Just then, her phone buzzed with a message from Daniel. "Hey Em, I'm thinking about starting a nonprofit. Something that helps people like me. It feels like the next step." Emily smiled as she read the message, her heart swelling with pride once again. This was Daniel, thinking bigger, dreaming beyond what seemed possible. He had come so far, and now he was preparing to create something that would help countless others. "That's amazing, Daniel. I know you'll make it happen. You've always had the heart for it. Just let me know how I can help." His response was almost immediate. "Thanks, Em. You've always had my back. I won't let you down." Emily stared at the message for a moment, a wave of emotion washing over her. She realized that the journey they had both been on, together and apart, had been about so much more than overcoming obstacles. It had been about the way they had grown, the way they had healed, and the way they had learned to be there for each other. She looked out at the city again, taking in the view of the skyline she had grown to love. The road ahead was still long, but it was full of promise, full of opportunity. And she knew, No matter what came their way, she and Daniel would always walk it together. The journey wasn't over, it was just beginning. The following months were a whirlwind of activity for both Emily and Daniel. Daniel had officially launched his nonprofit, focusing on providing educational resources, mentorship, and job training for individuals re-entering society after incarceration. The nonprofit's impact was immediate and word spread quickly. He had assembled a small but dedicated team, and their work was being recognized in the community. Daniel's vision was coming to life, and he had the support he needed to make it succeed. Emily continued to grow her counseling practice, and with each new client, she found herself more confident in her ability to help people who were struggling with the same kind of deep, emotional pain she had once faced. She had also begun to speak at local events about mental health and the importance of therapy, using her own experiences to connect with those who felt lost or trapped by their pasts. Her reputation as a compassionate and skilled counselor was steadily growing, and she was beginning to feel like she was fulfilling her true purpose. One evening, as Emily and Daniel sat at the same cozy cafe where they had shared so many important moments, Daniel leaned across the table, his eyes serious but filled with excitement. I've been thinking," he said. "This nonprofit thing, it's growing faster than I expected. We've been able to help a lot of people already, but we need more resources, more outreach. I think it's time to think bigger, to scale this up." Emily leaned forward, her eyebrows furrowing in concern, but also in curiosity. "What do you mean by think bigger?" Daniel's voice became more animated as he spoke. "We've been doing some small workshops and one-on-one coaching for people, but I want to build a larger network. I want to offer scholarships, partner with more organizations, maybe even open a physical space where people can come for job training, therapy, and mentorship. A real, sustainable place where people can rebuild their lives from the ground up." Emily listened intently, the vision Daniel was describing resonating deeply with her. She had seen firsthand how transformative it was to give people the tools to change their lives, to help them see their worth and potential. And now, Daniel was planning to create a place where that could happen on a larger scale. "That sounds incredible, Daniel," Emily said, her voice thick with admiration. "But it's going to take a lot of resources, a lot of work. Are you sure you're ready for that?" Daniel smiled, the confidence in his eyes never wavering. "I know it won't be easy, but I think we can do it. I've seen how much this work means to people, how it's changed their lives. And I think if we push harder, we can really make a difference. I'm ready to make it happen." Emily nodded slowly, her heart swelling with pride. She had always known Daniel was capable of doing great things, but hearing him articulate such a grand vision was a moment of realization. He wasn't just talking about helping a few people here and there. He was talking about changing systems, about building a foundation that could help generations of people who had been overlooked and underserved. "You've got this," Emily said with certainty. "And I'll be here to support you every step of the way." The next few months were a blur of planning, meetings, and strategy sessions. Daniel secured grants and donations to fund the expansion of his nonprofit, while Emily worked with him to refine the therapeutic services that would be offered at the new center. They brought in experts in various fields, job training specialists, social workers, mental health professionals, to create a holistic program that would address the many challenges people faced when re-entering society. As the new center began to take shape, Emily was amazed at the way it all came together. The physical space was warm and inviting, designed with the intention of making people feel safe and supported. There were classrooms for workshops, counseling rooms for one-on-one therapy, and even a small cafe where people could gather to share meals and support one another. The grand opening of the center was a celebration of everything they had worked toward. Emily and Daniel stood side by side as they cut the ribbon, surrounded by community members, donors, and supporters. It was a moment of triumph, a culmination of their hard work and shared vision. As the crowd cheered and people wandered through the space, Emily stood off to the side for a moment, quietly observing the impact of what they had created. Daniel had always been the driving force behind the nonprofit, but Emily had played a crucial role as well. She had helped him see that his dreams were possible, that he wasn't just helping individuals, he was changing the course of entire lives. Daniel approached her, his eyes shining with gratitude. "We did it, Em. This is everything we've talked about." Emily smiled softly, her heart full. "You did it, Daniel. I'm just so proud of you." He gave her a small, almost shy smile. "We did this together. I couldn't have done it without you." They stood there for a moment, side by side, taking in the moment. It wasn't just the success of the center that filled Emily with pride. It was the journey they had both taken to get here. The healing, the growth, the challenges they had overcome. They had come so far from the fractured, broken family they had been to the powerful force for good they were now. Over the next few years, the center continued to grow, helping countless individuals rebuild their lives. Emily and Daniel remained deeply involved, working together to ensure that the programs were meeting the needs of the community. Daniel had become a well-respected leader in his field, and Emily's counseling practice flourished as well. They both continued to mentor others, offering guidance and support to those who, like them, were seeking a second chance. One day, as Emily sat in her office, reflecting on how much had changed since she had first arrived in Brooklyn, she thought about how everything had come full circle. She had started this journey uncertain of her place in the world, and now she was living a life that was rich with meaning, purpose, and connection. And as she thought about Daniel, about the man he had become, the impact he was making on the world, she realized that their journey wasn't just about the obstacles they had overcome. It was about the way they had taken those obstacles and turned them into something beautiful. Together, they had found healing, and through that healing, they had found a way to help others. Emily smiled, leaning back in her chair and looking out the window at the bustling city below. She had done more than just survive. She had thrived. And she had helped Daniel do the same. Together, they had built something that would last, a legacy of healing, hope, and second chances. And for the first time in a long time, Emily knew that the future was bright, not just for her, but for all the lives she and Daniel had touched along the way. The journey was far from over. But now, more than ever, they were ready to face whatever came next together.